My marriage was like my old tool belt, worn, heavy, and full of holes I kept pretending weren't there. The difference was that I could replace a tool belt. Daniel, we need to talk. Simone stood in our kitchen doorway, her real estate blazer still crisp despite the late hour. At 35, she maintained the kind of polished appearance that opened doors in her industry, doors that apparently led to places I wasn't invited. Sure, I said, not looking up from the structural plans spread across our granite island. Let me guess. Another late client meeting? The silence stretched long enough for me to notice. In 15 years of marriage, Simone had never been at a loss for words. I raised my head to find her studying me with the same expression she used when evaluating properties, calculating square footage, weighing potential against reality. I've been thinking about us, she said finally, about where we are. I set down my pencil. As a structural engineer and building inspector, I spent my days measuring things, stress loads, foundation integrity, the precise point where structures failed. I had a feeling I was about to learn where ours ranked on that scale. And? She moved to the window overlooking our backyard, her reflection ghost-like against the evening darkness. I met someone, Daniel. The words hit with the precision of a demolition charge placed exactly where it would cause maximum damage, but I'd been expecting this conversation for months, watching the signs accumulate like hairline cracks in concrete. I see. My voice remained steady, professional. Anyone I know? Gregory Thornton. She turned to face me, her chin lifted in that defiant way that used to make me laugh. Now it just made me tired. He's a developer, successful, he understands ambition. Gregory Thornton. I knew the name. Everyone in construction did. He built luxury condos and office complexes, the kind of projects that made local news and city council meetings. The kind of man who wore $1,000 suits to job sites and never got dirt under his fingernails. Successful, I repeated. Unlike your husband, the building inspector. That's not what I meant. Isn't it? She crossed her arms, her wedding ring catching the overhead light. You've gotten comfortable, Daniel. Settled. When was the last time you took a risk? Pushed for something bigger? I gestured at the plans before me. I'm reviewing the safety specifications for the new hospital wing. Seems pretty important to me. Important, yes, but not impressive. Her voice carried the weight of years of accumulated disappointment. Gregory is building a 40-story residential tower downtown. He's changing the skyline. And I'm making sure buildings don't collapse and hurt people. Different priorities, I suppose. Different ambitions. She moved closer, her perfume, something expensive I didn't recognize, filling the space between us. Compared to him, you're nothing, Daniel. I need you to understand that. There it was, the final measurement, delivered with the clinical precision of an engineer's report. No emotion, no apology, just the mathematical reality as she saw it. I nodded slowly. I understand. Something flickered across her face, surprise maybe, or disappointment that I hadn't fought back. But what was the point? She'd made her calculation, weighed me against Gregory Thornton, and found me insufficient. The numbers didn't lie. I'll be staying at Tara's for a while, she continued, to think things through. Tara Mendez, her closest friend and fellow real estate agent, the one who'd been giving me knowing looks at dinner parties for the past 6 months, like she was privy to information I wasn't, which apparently she was. Of course. I gathered the hospital plans into a neat stack. Take whatever time you need. She hesitated at the kitchen doorway. Daniel, It's fine, Simone. Really. After she left, I sat alone in our kitchen, surrounded by the trappings of a life we'd built together. The granite countertops she'd insisted on, the stainless steel appliances that reflected my face in distorted fragments, the breakfast nook where we used to read the Sunday paper and plan our weekends. My phone buzzed against the counter. A text from Luis, my co-worker, and the closest thing I had to a best friend. Beer tomorrow? Jennifer's working late. I typed back, rain check, got some measuring to do. Because that's what engineers do when structures fail. We investigate, we document, we figure out exactly what went wrong and why. And sometimes, if we're very careful and very thorough, we get the chance to rebuild something better. The next morning brought the kind of gray Seattle drizzle that made everything look like a watercolor painting left in the rain. I sat in my truck outside Thornton Development's downtown office, watching well-dressed people hurry through the revolving doors of the glass and steel tower. Simone's car wasn't in the visitor parking, but that didn't mean anything. She could have parked in the underground garage, or taken the bus, or had Gregory pick her up. The possibilities multiplied like structural load calculations, each variable creating new potential outcomes. My phone buzzed. A text from Simone. Picking up more clothes today. Will you be home around 3? I replied, at work, keys under the planter. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, thank you. Polite. Distant. Like I was a helpful neighbor instead of the man she'd shared a bed with for 15 years. At the office, I threw myself into work with the kind of focus that made Luis raise his eyebrows. I reviewed structural reports, updated safety databases, and scheduled inspections with mechanical precision. But my mind kept drifting to Gregory Thornton. You're being weird, Luis announced around noon, dropping into the chair across from my desk with a sandwich that smelled like pastrami and regret. Weirder than usual, I mean. Thanks for the clarification. Seriously, man, you've been staring at that computer screen like it owes you money. What's going on? I considered telling him. Luis was a good friend, the kind who'd listen without judgment and offer practical advice. But this felt too raw, too fresh, like a wound that needed time to scab over before anyone else could examine it. Just focused, I said. Uh-huh. He took a massive bite of sandwich, chewing thoughtfully. This have anything to do with why Simone's been posting cryptic quotes on social media? My fingers paused over the keyboard. What kind of quotes? The usual breakup nonsense. Sometimes you have to let go of the life you plan to find the life you're meant to live. That sort of thing. He swallowed, studying my face. You two having problems? Something like that. Want to talk about it? Not particularly. Want to get drunk and pretend it's not happening? Maybe later. He nodded, understanding that some conversations couldn't be forced. I'm here when you're ready, okay? After he left, I opened a new browser window and typed Gregory Thornton into the search bar. The results painted a picture of success that would have been impressive if it wasn't so irritating. Thornton Development had built half the luxury housing in the Seattle metro area over the past decade. Gregory himself appeared in business journals, charity event photos, and city planning meetings, always impeccably dressed and confident. And engaged. The announcement had appeared in the Seattle Times Society pages just 3 weeks ago. Gregory Thornton and Rebecca Walsh, daughter of prominent attorney Richard Walsh, were planning a June wedding at the family estate in Bellevue. The photo showed a couple that belonged in a magazine ad for expensive watches or imported cars. Him in a tailored suit, her in something that probably cost more than my truck. Rebecca Walsh was beautiful in the way that money could enhance natural advantages. Blonde hair that caught light like spun gold, a smile that suggested she'd never encountered a problem that couldn't be solved with the right connections or sufficient funds. She looked happy, genuinely, radiantly happy. She also looked like someone who deserved to know that her fiancé was telling other women they were nothing compared to him. I screenshot the engagement announcement and saved it to a folder I labeled documentation. Then I opened Simone's social media profiles and began scrolling through her recent posts. Luis was right about the quotes, but there were other things too. Check-ins at restaurants I'd never been to, photos with people I didn't recognize, a gradual shift in her online presence that suggested a life I wasn't part of. The most recent post was from yesterday evening, A picture of her wine glass at some upscale bar downtown with the caption, "Celebrating New Beginnings." 17 likes, including one from Gregory Thornton. I clicked on his profile. Private, but his profile picture showed him standing in front of a construction site, hard hat in hand, looking like he was posing for a campaign poster. The kind of man who built empires while I made sure they wouldn't fall down. My phone rang. Constance Blackwell, the family attorney who'd handled our wills and property transfers. "Daniel," her voice carried its usual professional warmth. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything important. Just reviewing some reports. What can I do for you?" "Actually, I was calling to see how you're doing. Simone contacted me yesterday about updating some documents. She seemed stressed." Constance had been our lawyer for 8 years, but she'd been my friend longer than that. We'd met in college, dated briefly before realizing we were better suited as friends, and maintained that friendship even after she married and moved to Seattle. She was one of the few people who could read between the lines of legal requests. "We're having some difficulties," I said carefully. "I gathered that. She wants to know about asset division, property rights, that sort of thing. Daniel, if you need someone to talk to..." "I appreciate that, really, but I'm handling things." "Of course you are. You always do." A pause. "But if you need legal advice, or just want someone to listen, I'm here." After we hung up, I sat back in my chair and considered my options. I could confront Simone directly, demand explanations and apologies that wouldn't change anything. I could hire a private investigator, gather evidence for a divorce proceeding that would drag on for months. I could accept her assessment of my worth and quietly divide our assets while she built a new life with someone more impressive. Or I could do what engineers do best: analyze the structure, identify the weak points, and apply pressure exactly where it would have the most impact. I opened a new document and began typing. The key to understanding any structure is identifying the load-bearing elements, the parts that hold everything else up. Remove the right support at the right time, and even the most impressive building becomes a pile of expensive rubble. Gregory Thornton's life, I was discovering, had several interesting load-bearing elements. I spent the evening conducting what I generously called research, and what others might have termed stalking. Public records showed his business holdings, real estate transactions, and legal filings. Social media provided glimpses into his personal life, the charity galas, business dinners, and carefully curated moments that projected success and stability. Most importantly, it revealed his relationship with Rebecca Walsh. Their engagement photos told a story of two people who'd found their perfect match. Rebecca gazed at Gregory with the kind of adoration usually reserved for religious experiences or particularly good chocolate. Gregory looked back with the satisfied expression of a man who'd acquired exactly what he'd always wanted. The wedding planning had clearly consumed months of Rebecca's life. Her Instagram account documented every detail: venue visits, dress fittings, cake tastings, flower arrangements. She'd created Pinterest boards with hundreds of pins, each one a piece of the perfect day she was building with meticulous care. The wedding was scheduled for June 15th, 6 weeks away. My phone buzzed, a text from Simone. "Can we talk tomorrow? I think we should discuss next steps." I stared at the message for a long moment before responding. "Sure, what time works for you?" "Lunch? That place on Pine Street you like." "Sounds good." 3 dots appeared and disappeared several times before her final message arrived. "I know this is hard, Daniel. I hope we can be civilized about it." Civilized. Like we were diplomats negotiating a treaty instead of two people dismantling 15 years of shared history. I set the phone aside and returned to my research. Gregory's business operated out of the tower I'd visited that morning, but he also maintained a personal office in a converted warehouse in the Arts District. According to the building permits I'd pulled, perfectly legally as part of my job, the space included living quarters. a place where a successful developer might entertain clients or, perhaps, conduct affairs away from prying eyes. The warehouse had been built in 1923, renovated in 2018. The renovation permits showed extensive electrical and plumbing work, along with the installation of a security system that would have impressed a small bank. Gregory Thornton clearly valued his privacy. I made a note to schedule a routine inspection of the building. The permits were 2 years old, well within the time frame for follow-up safety checks. Nothing suspicious about a building inspector doing his job. The next morning brought sunshine and the kind of crisp air that made Seattle feel like the best-kept secret on the West Coast. I arrived at the restaurant early, choosing a table near the window where I could watch Simone approach. She appeared precisely on time, wearing a navy dress I'd bought her for Christmas 2 years ago and walking with the confident stride of someone who'd made difficult decisions and was prepared to defend them. "You look good," she said, settling into the chair across from me. "Rested." "Thanks," I signaled the waitress. "Coffee?" "Please." We ordered, salmon for her, burger for me, the same meals we'd chosen at this restaurant dozens of times before. The familiarity felt surreal, like we were actors performing a play we'd rehearsed but never understood. "I've been thinking about what I said the other night," she began after the waitress left. "About you and Gregory. That wasn't fair. It was honest. Honest, but cruel." She twisted her wedding ring, a nervous habit I'd noticed years ago. "I don't want this to be ugly, Daniel. We've been good to each other for a long time." "Have we?" The question seemed to catch her off guard. "Of course we have. We've built a life together. We've been partners." Partners. I tested the word. "Is that what you call it when one partner decides the other isn't worth keeping?" "That's not—" She stopped, took a breath. "I'm not happy, Daniel. I haven't been happy for a long time. Neither have you, if you're honest about it." She wasn't wrong. Happiness had become something we'd scheduled around work obligations and social commitments, a weekend activity squeezed between household maintenance and family visits. When had we stopped looking forward to coming home to each other? "So you found someone who makes you happy," I said. "Yes." No hesitation, no apology. "I did. And he's everything I'm not." "He's different from you. That doesn't make him better. But it makes him worth leaving me for." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to the tone she used when trying to close difficult real estate deals. "Daniel, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. I'd prefer easy." "What does easy look like?" "We divide assets fairly. I keep the house. I can refinance to buy out your half. You keep your retirement accounts, your truck, whatever personal items matter to you. We file no-fault divorce papers and move on with our lives." "And what does hard look like?" Her jaw tightened. "Lawyers, depositions, fighting over every piece of furniture and photograph, months of making each other miserable while we pay strangers to document our failures." I nodded slowly. "Those do sound like the options." "So? I'll think about it." "Daniel, I said I'll think about it, Simone. That's not unreasonable." She studied my face like she was trying to read blueprints written in a language she didn't quite understand. "You're being very calm about this. Would you prefer hysterics?" "I'd prefer honesty. What are you thinking? What are you planning?" "I'm thinking that 15 years deserves more than a lunch conversation and an ultimatum." I finished my coffee and stood. "I'm planning to take some time to process this properly." "How much time?" "As much as I need." I left her sitting at the table, probably calculating how long she could afford to wait before Gregory started questioning her availability. But that was her problem now. I had my own calculations to make. The beautiful thing about being a building inspector is that people expect you to show up unannounced and ask uncomfortable questions. It's literally my job to find problems others have overlooked or hidden. Gregory Thornton's warehouse conversion passed its original inspection, But buildings change over time. Structures settle, systems age, and sometimes new safety concerns arise that require follow-up visits. The fact that I'd scheduled this particular follow-up for a Thursday afternoon when Gregory would likely be at his downtown office was simply efficient time management. The building sat on a quiet street lined with art galleries and boutique shops, its brick facade carefully preserved to maintain the neighborhood's historic character. The renovation had been tasteful and expensive, the kind of project that won architectural awards and appeared in design magazines. I parked across the street and checked my equipment: camera, measuring tools, safety checklist, and a small device Luis had given me as a joke last Christmas, a wireless signal detector designed to locate hidden cameras and recording devices. "For when you think your landlord is spying on you," he'd said, laughing at his own paranoia. I'd never found a use for it until today. The building's main entrance led to Gregory's business offices, but a separate door on the side street accessed the residential portion. According to the plans, the living space included a bedroom, kitchen, and sitting area designed for entertaining. The security system I'd noted in the permits was clearly visible: cameras at each entrance, motion sensors, the works. I knocked on the business entrance first. Professional courtesy, in case Gregory was in. No answer, which I'd expected. The residential entrance was next, and when no one responded there either, I used the override key provided to city inspectors for emergency access. The living space was exactly what I'd expected from a man who built luxury developments for wealthy clients. Exposed brick walls, polished concrete floors, furniture that looked like it belonged in a museum. Everything carefully chosen to project success and sophisticated taste. It also looked recently used. Coffee cups in the sink, newspapers scattered on the table, the faint scent of perfume I recognized but couldn't quite place. I began my inspection systematically, documenting everything with photographs and measurements: electrical outlets, plumbing fixtures, ventilation systems, structural elements, all perfectly up to code, as I'd expected. Gregory might be many things, but he wasn't careless about building safety. The wireless detector remained silent until I reached the bedroom. Then it began chirping softly, indicating the presence of electronic devices beyond the obvious security cameras. I followed the signal to a small table beside the bed, where it intensified near what looked like a decorative lamp. Interesting, but not my concern. I was here to inspect the building's safety features, not investigate Gregory's personal electronics. I was photographing the bedroom's smoke detector when I heard voices outside. A man and woman, their conversation too muffled to understand, but their tone suggesting familiarity. The woman laughed at something the man said, a sound that made my chest tighten with recognition. Through the bedroom window, I watched Gregory Thornton unlock the side entrance. He was dressed casually, jeans and a button-down shirt that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. The woman behind him wore a red coat I'd bought for Simone's birthday last year. They disappeared into the building below me. I heard the main door close, followed by footsteps and muffled conversation. Then, silence. I finished my inspection quickly, documenting the remaining safety features with professional efficiency. Whatever was happening downstairs wasn't my business. I was just a building inspector doing his job, making sure the structure met current safety codes. But as I prepared to leave, voices drifted up from the sitting area below. The building's old construction meant sound carried between floors, especially when people weren't being careful about volume. "Told him we needed to discuss next steps," Simone was saying. "How did he take it?" Gregory's voice carried the confidence of a man accustomed to getting what he wanted. "Better than expected. He's being very calm about everything. Calm can be dangerous. Emotional people are predictable. Calm people think too much." Simone laughed, but it sounded forced. "You don't know Daniel. He's not the revenge type. He'll process this like an engineering problem, analyze the situation, accept the data, and move on to the next project." "If you say so," But men don't like being replaced, especially by someone obviously superior. Obviously superior. Now Simone's laugh sounded genuine. Confident much? Realistic. I'm building a 40-story tower downtown while he checks other people's work for code violations. I drive a Porsche. He drives a pickup truck. I'm taking you to Paris next month. He takes you to chain restaurants. The comparison isn't exactly subtle. He's a good man, Gregory, just limited. Limited men can become dangerous when they realize their limitations. I stood frozen at the top of the stairs, my inspection equipment suddenly feeling heavy in my hands. This was the conversation I'd been expecting but hoping to avoid, the moment when I learned exactly how little my wife thought of me and how much her new man understood about power dynamics. Daniel isn't dangerous, Simone said firmly. He's predictable. He'll want to discuss terms, maybe negotiate a few details, but ultimately he'll do what's practical. That's who he is. And what about your wedding? Rebecca's been planning this thing for months. That's your problem to solve. I told you from the beginning that I wouldn't be the other woman indefinitely. I know. And I meant what I said about ending things with her. It's just complicated. How complicated can it be? You tell her the truth and move on. The truth? Gregory's voice carried an edge I hadn't heard before. That I'm leaving her for a married real estate agent? That'll go over well with her father and his law firm. Richard Walsh has connections throughout the city, Simone. Connections I need for future projects. The silence stretched long enough for me to wonder if they'd moved to another room. Then Simone spoke, her voice colder than I'd heard it in years. So I'm supposed to wait while you manage your business relationships? You're supposed to understand that some things take time. Rebecca's father represents half the developers in Seattle. I can't afford to make an enemy of him right now. And I can't afford to wait indefinitely while you figure out how to have everything you want without consequences. What's that supposed to mean? It means I'm divorcing Daniel either way. If you're not ready to make a commitment, I'll find someone who is. More silence. Then Gregory's voice, smoother now, placating. Come here. You know you're the only one I want. Prove it. I'd heard enough, more than enough. I gathered my equipment and headed for the exit, moving as quietly as possible down the back stairs and out through the business entrance. My truck started on the first try, and I drove away without looking back at the building where my wife was demanding proof of love from a man who was calculating the cost of giving it to her. But I'd learned something valuable during my inspection. Gregory Thornton's life had more load-bearing elements than I'd initially realized. His business relationships, his engagement to Rebecca Walsh, his reputation in a city where everyone knew everyone else's business. And now I had a better understanding of exactly where to apply pressure. Engineers live by documentation. Every decision, every measurement, every observation gets recorded because memory fades but data endures. What I'd overheard at Gregory's warehouse was valuable intelligence, but it wouldn't mean much without supporting evidence. That's where modern technology becomes an engineer's best friend. I spent Friday evening researching phone monitoring software with the same methodical approach I used for structural analysis. The internet offered dozens of options, from simple parental controls to sophisticated surveillance systems used by corporations and private investigators. Most required physical access to the target device, but some could be installed remotely if you had the right information. Information like the phone number, email address, and security questions for an account you'd helped set up years ago when your wife first got serious about social media. Simone had always been casual about digital security. She used the same password for everything, our anniversary date followed by her initials, and stored all her login information in a notes app that synced across her devices. I'd helped her set up most of her accounts back when she'd first gotten into real estate and needed a professional online presence. The monitoring software I chose was designed for parents who wanted to keep track of their children's online activities. It could record text messages, track location data, and even capture screenshots of social media conversations. The installation was surprisingly simple, just a matter of logging into her cloud account and downloading the appropriate app. Within an hour, I had access to everything: text messages, call logs, email conversations, social media activity, even her location data from the past several weeks. It painted a picture of a double life that was more extensive than I'd imagined. The affair with Gregory had been going on for 4 months. Their first meeting had been professional. He'd contacted her about selling one of his properties, but the conversations had quickly turned personal. The early messages were flirtatious but careful, the kind of professional boundary crossing that could be explained away if discovered. But as weeks passed, the messages became explicit. Gregory described what he wanted to do to her in language that would have made a romance novelist blush. Simone responded with equal enthusiasm, sharing details about our marriage that made my stomach clench with embarrassment and anger. "Daniel's so predictable," she'd written in one exchange. "Same routine every day, same conversations every night. I feel like I'm married to a piece of furniture." Gregory's response: "Furniture can be replaced, especially when you find something better designed." LOL. "Speaking of design, when do I get to see your place?" "Soon. Rebecca's been asking too many questions about my schedule. Need to be careful." "How much longer are you going to string her along?" "As long as necessary. The wedding's in June. After that, things will be different." "Different how?" "Trust me. Everything will work out." The location data showed regular visits to Gregory's warehouse, lunch meetings at expensive restaurants, and overnight stays at hotels I'd never heard of. She'd built an entire relationship while maintaining the facade of our marriage, lying to my face every day while planning my replacement. But the most damaging evidence wasn't about Simone at all. It was about Gregory. His messages revealed a man who was playing multiple games simultaneously. While promising Simone a future together, he was also texting Rebecca about wedding plans, honeymoon destinations, and the house they were planning to buy in Bellevue. He'd told Simone the engagement was just for show, but his messages to Rebecca suggested genuine affection and commitment. Or maybe he was just a better actor than I'd given him credit for. The most interesting discovery came from Gregory's social media activity. While his public posts projected confidence and success, his private messages told a different story. Thornton Development was facing serious financial pressure. 2 major projects had been delayed by permit issues, and a third had been canceled when the primary investor pulled out. Gregory was leveraging everything he owned to keep the business afloat, including taking loans against Rebecca's family property that would become legally his once they married. I screenshot everything, organizing the evidence into folders labeled by date and type. Text messages, social media posts, financial documents, location data. A comprehensive record of deception that would be devastating in the right hands. The question was, whose hands those should be. I could confront Simone directly, present the evidence and demand explanations that wouldn't change anything. I could take everything to a divorce attorney and use it to negotiate a better settlement. I could sit on the information and wait to see how the situation developed naturally. Or I could share it with someone who had even more to lose than I did. Rebecca Walsh's contact information was easy to find. Her social media profiles included links to her personal website, which listed her email address and phone number alongside her photography portfolio and wedding planning blog. She was an artist, I learned, specializing in nature photography that captured the Pacific Northwest in all its moody beauty. She was also deeply, genuinely in love with Gregory Thornton. Her recent blog posts chronicled the final weeks of wedding preparation with the enthusiasm of someone living her dream. Dress fittings, venue decorations, menu tastings, every detail documented with photographs and excited commentary. She wrote about Gregory with the kind of adoration usually reserved for fairy tale princes, describing him as her perfect match and the man who makes everything possible. Reading her posts felt like watching someone walk toward a cliff while admiring the scenery. I opened a new email and began typing. Ms. Walsh, my name is Daniel Ashford. We've never met, but I believe we have something important in common. We're both involved with Gregory Thornton, though in very different ways. I'm writing because I've recently discovered information that I believe you deserve to know before your wedding next month. I realize this email must seem strange, and you have no reason to trust a stranger, but I hope you'll consider the possibility that someone who cares about your well-being might have good reasons for reaching out. I've attached several screenshots of text message conversations between Gregory and my wife, Simone. These messages span the past 4 months and document a relationship that goes far beyond professional or casual friendship. I'm sharing this information not out of spite, but because I believe you deserve to make informed decisions about your future. If you'd like to discuss this further, I'm available at your convenience. If you prefer to verify this information independently, I understand completely. Either way, I hope you'll take the time to review what I've shared. I'm sorry to be the bearer of difficult news. Sincerely, Daniel Ashford. I attached a carefully selected sample of the most damaging screenshots, enough to establish the pattern without overwhelming her with details. Messages that clearly showed the timeline of the affair, Gregory's promises to Simone, and most importantly, his dismissive comments about Rebecca herself. She's sweet but naive, he'd written to Simone just last week. Thinks love conquers all, useful for now, but not exactly stimulating conversation. I read the email 3 times, checking for tone and accuracy. It struck the right balance, informative without being vindictive, concerned without being manipulative. The kind of message I'd want to receive if our situations were reversed. My finger hovered over the send button for a long moment. Once I sent this, there would be no taking it back. Rebecca's life would change forever, and the ripple effects would reach far beyond just her and Gregory. But she deserved to know. Whatever else happened, she deserved to make her own choices based on accurate information. I clicked send. The response came faster than I'd expected. Rebecca Walsh called at 7:30 Saturday morning, her voice tight with controlled emotion. Mr. Ashford, this is Rebecca Walsh. I received your email. Ms. Walsh, thank you for calling. I need to ask you something directly. Is this some kind of joke? Or revenge scheme? Because if you're trying to hurt Gregory... I understand your skepticism, I interrupted gently. If someone had sent me this information about my wife, I'd have reacted the same way. Can I ask if you've had a chance to review the screenshots? Silence. Then, yes. And? They look real. But people can fake these things, can't they? Digital manipulation? They can. Would you like me to provide additional verification? I can show you the original messages on my wife's phone, if that would help. Another pause. Your wife, Simone. How long have you been married? 15 years. And you just found out about this? Recently, yes. I'm sorry. Her voice softened slightly. That must be devastating. It is, but not as devastating as it would be to marry someone and discover this information afterward. Why are you telling me this? What do you want? It was a fair question, and one I'd been asking myself since sending the email. Honestly, I want my wife to face consequences for her choices. I want Gregory to face consequences for his, but mostly, I want you to have the information you need to make your own decisions. The wedding is in 3 weeks. I know. I'm sorry about the timing. 3 weeks, she repeated, and I could hear her processing the implications. The venue, the catering, the flowers, the guests coming from out of state, my dress. I know this is overwhelming. Do you? Her voice turned sharp. Do you really? Because you're not the one who has to call 200 people and explain why the wedding they've planned to attend is canceled. You're not the one who has to tell your parents that the man they welcomed into the family has been lying to everyone for months. She was right, of course. I was asking her to detonate her own life based on information from a stranger. The fact that the information was true didn't make the request any less devastating. "You're absolutely right," I said. "I'm asking you to consider something horrible based on evidence from someone you don't know. If you want to verify this independently, I understand. If you want to confront Gregory directly, that's your choice. If you want to ignore everything and proceed with the wedding, I won't contact you again. But you think I should cancel? I think you should make whatever decision you can live with long term." "And what decision are you making? About your wife?" "I'm divorcing her." "When?" "As soon as possible." She was quiet for so long I thought she might have hung up. Then, "Can I see the original messages? The ones on her phone?" "Of course. When and where would be convenient?" "Today. This afternoon. I need to know for certain before I do anything irreversible." We arranged to meet at a coffee shop in Bellevue, neutral territory where she'd feel safe meeting a stranger who'd just upended her world. I spent the morning preparing, organizing the evidence into a clear timeline that would be easy to follow and difficult to misinterpret. Simone's phone continued to provide a steady stream of new messages. She and Gregory were planning to meet Sunday evening, apparently for a conversation about next steps and timeline adjustments. Reading their exchanges felt like watching a demolition in slow motion. Two people systematically destroying the foundations of other people's lives while congratulating themselves on their strategic thinking. The coffee shop was busy with Saturday afternoon customers, families, and couples enjoying the kind of casual weekend ritual that had once been part of my own routine. I found a quiet corner table and waited, recognizing Rebecca immediately when she walked through the door. She was smaller than she appeared in photographs, more delicate, with the kind of natural beauty that didn't need enhancement or artifice. She wore jeans and a simple sweater, her blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail that made her look younger than her 32 years. But her eyes held the wariness of someone who'd learned to question everything she thought she knew. "Mr. Ashford?" "Daniel, please. Thank you for coming." She sat across from me, her movements careful and controlled. "Show me." I placed Simone's phone on the table between us. I'd already opened the message thread with Gregory, scrolling back to the beginning so she could see the full progression of their relationship. Rebecca read in silence, her expression growing more strained with each exchange. When she reached the messages from the previous week, the ones where Gregory described her as sweet but naive and useful for now, her hands began to shake slightly. "How did you get these?" she asked without looking up. "Monitoring software, installed on her phone through her cloud account." "Is that legal?" "In Washington, yes. Spouses have the right to monitor shared devices and accounts." She continued reading, occasionally scrolling back to reread particularly damaging exchanges. When she reached the messages about Gregory's financial situation, his debts, his plans to use her family's property as collateral, his casual dismissal of her concerns about their budget, her face went pale. "He told me the business was thriving," she said quietly. "According to these messages, he's been hiding significant financial problems for months. My father offered to help with some of the wedding expenses. Gregory said it wasn't necessary, that he wanted to pay for everything himself. He said it was important to him to provide for me properly. According to the financial documents I found, he's been borrowing against future projects to maintain his lifestyle, projects that may not actually exist." She set the phone down and stared out the window at the parking lot where expensive cars reflected the afternoon sunlight. "I feel so stupid." "You're not stupid. You're trusting. There's a difference." "Is there?" "Because right now they feel like the same thing. Gregory is good at this. He's been managing multiple deceptions simultaneously for months. That takes skill and practice." "Multiple deceptions." She turned back to me. "How many others do you think there are?" "I don't know. but based on what I've seen, I doubt Simone is the first. Rebecca nodded slowly, like she was fitting puzzle pieces together in her mind. There were things, little inconsistencies, schedule changes, phone calls he'd take in another room, business trips that seemed vague. I told myself I was being paranoid. You were being normal. People in healthy relationships don't usually expect systematic deception. What are you going to do now? About your wife? File for divorce Monday morning, present this evidence and negotiate the best settlement I can get. And Gregory? That depends on what you decide to do. She picked up the phone again, scrolling through more messages. He's supposed to come to dinner tomorrow night. My parents want to discuss some final wedding details. She looked up at me. What would you do? If you were me? I'd probably want to confront him directly. Get his side of the story, see if there's any explanation that makes sense. But you don't think there is? No, I don't. Neither do I. She handed the phone back to me. Can you send me copies of these screenshots? I want to show them to my father. Of course. And Daniel, thank you for telling me. I know this wasn't easy. You deserve to know. She stood to leave, then paused. What happens next? After tomorrow? I don't know. But whatever happens, you'll be making decisions based on the truth instead of lies. That has to count for something. After she left, I sat in the coffee shop for another hour, watching families enjoy their weekend routines and thinking about the conversation that would take place at the Walsh family dinner table tomorrow night. Rebecca would show her father the evidence, explain the situation, and together they would decide how to handle Gregory's deception. Richard Walsh was one of the most powerful attorneys in Seattle, with connections throughout the business and political communities. He was not the kind of man who would take kindly to someone attempting to defraud his daughter and exploit his family's resources. Gregory Thornton was about to discover that some structures, once damaged, couldn't be repaired. Sunday evening brought the kind of Pacific Northwest sunset that made postcards jealous. Orange and pink light reflecting off the sound, while Mount Rainier stood silhouetted against the sky. I was grilling salmon on my back deck, enjoying the solitude and trying not to think about the conversation happening across town at the Walsh family estate. My phone buzzed with a text from Simone. Staying at Tara's again tonight. We should talk soon about practical matters. Practical matters. Like she was discussing a business transaction instead of the end of our marriage. I typed back, Tuesday works for me. Coffee at 10. Perfect. Thank you for being reasonable about this. Reasonable. If she only knew what reasonable actually looked like. The call came at 8:15, just as I was finishing dinner. Rebecca's voice was steadier than it had been yesterday, but I could hear the exhaustion underneath. It's over, she said without preamble. The engagement? Everything. The engagement, the wedding, whatever relationship we had. My father wants to sue him for fraud, but I talked him out of it. For now. How did Gregory react? Badly. He tried to deny everything at first, then claimed the messages were taken out of context. When that didn't work, he got angry, started saying things about you, about Simone, about how none of this was his fault. I'm sorry you had to go through that. Don't be. I needed to see who he really was when cornered. It was educational. I could imagine. Men like Gregory were used to controlling narratives, managing perceptions, staying ahead of consequences. When that control disappeared, their true nature tended to surface quickly. What happens now? I asked. Now I cancel a wedding, return gifts, and figure out how to rebuild a life I thought was already perfect. She paused. What about you? Have you talked to Simone? We're meeting Tuesday. I suspect she's going to be surprised by how much I know. Are you going to tell her about me? About what happened tonight? I don't think I'll need to. Gregory will probably handle that himself. You're right. He was already texting someone when he left, probably warning her that their plan just collapsed. After we hung up, I poured myself a glass of wine and settled into my deck chair to wait. It didn't take long. My phone rang at 8:45. Gregory Thornton's name appeared on the caller ID, which was interesting since I'd never given him my number. He must have gotten it from Simone, which meant she already knew about the evening's events. Daniel Ashford? His voice carried the controlled fury of a man trying very hard not to lose his temper completely. Speaking. I think we need to have a conversation. About what? About the lies you've been spreading about me and your wife. I haven't spread any lies, Gregory. I've only shared facts. Facts? His control slipped slightly. You violated Simone's privacy, stole personal communications, and used them to destroy my relationship with Rebecca. That's not facts. That's stalking. Actually, it's legal spousal monitoring of shared accounts. I checked with my attorney. Your attorney can go to... He caught himself. This isn't over, Daniel. You think you're clever, but you have no idea who you're messing with. I'm messing with a man who's been lying to his fiancée while conducting an affair with my wife. A man who's been borrowing money against property he doesn't own to fund a lifestyle he can't afford. A man who just lost everything because he got careless with his phone security. Silence. Then, what do you want? I want you to stay away from my wife. And if I don't, then you'll discover that building inspectors have access to a lot of interesting information about construction projects, permit applications, and safety violations. Information that could be very expensive for a developer who's already facing financial difficulties. It was a bluff mostly. I couldn't manufacture safety violations that didn't exist, and I wouldn't risk my professional reputation by filing false reports. But Gregory didn't know that, and men who were already panicking tended to assume the worst about their enemy's capabilities. You're threatening me? I'm explaining consequences. Actions have them, Gregory. You're about to learn that lesson in detail. He hung up without another word. 20 minutes later, Simone called. What have you done? Her voice was tight with barely controlled panic. I've done my homework. Gregory says you've been spying on me, that you sent private messages to Rebecca and ruined their engagement. I sent Rebecca information she deserved to have before making the biggest decision of her life. Just like I deserved to have information before you made decisions about ours. Daniel, you don't understand. This is complicated. Gregory and you are over. His engagement is canceled, his reputation is damaged, and his financial situation is about to become public knowledge. Whatever future you thought you were building with him just disappeared. That's not true. He loves me. This is just a setback. Simone, listen to me carefully. Gregory Thornton used you to have an affair while planning to marry someone else for her family's money and connections. He never intended to leave Rebecca. He told you what you wanted to hear while telling her what she wanted to hear. You were a convenience, not a priority. You're lying. I have screenshots of every message you've exchanged for the past 4 months. I know about the warehouse, the hotel meetings, the promises he made to you, and the promises he made to her. I know about his financial problems and his plans to use Rebecca's family property as collateral for loans. I know everything, Simone. The silence stretched so long I thought she might have hung up. Then, how? Monitoring software on your phone, installed through your cloud account. That's illegal. No, it's not. Spouses have the right to monitor shared devices and accounts in Washington state. I checked. I can't believe you would violate my privacy like that. I can't believe you would violate our marriage like you did. But here we are. What do you want, Daniel? What's this really about? It's about consequences, Simone. For 4 months, you've been lying to me every day while planning my replacement. You've been sharing intimate details of our marriage with another man, mocking me to someone who was using you for entertainment while planning to marry someone else. You've been building a fantasy future with a man who saw you as a temporary diversion. That's not. It is. And now that fantasy is over, and you're going to have to face reality. Gregory is done with you. His engagement is canceled, his business is in trouble, and he's going to be focused on damage control for the foreseeable future. Whatever promises he made about your future together are worthless. You don't know that. I know that desperate men make desperate choices, and right now Gregory Thornton is very desperate. So what happens now? Now you decide whether you want to handle our divorce amicably or whether you want me to present all of this evidence to a judge and let them decide how to divide our assets. You would do that? Humiliate me publicly? Simone, you humiliated yourself. I'm just deciding whether to document it legally. She was crying now, the kind of helpless sobs that came when someone realized their carefully constructed plans had collapsed completely. I never meant for this to happen, she said. Yes, you did. You meant for all of this to happen. You just thought you could control the timing and the consequences. What if I ended things with Gregory? What if we tried to work things out? It's too late for that. Daniel, please, we've been together for 15 years. That has to count for something. It does count for something. It counts for a fair division of assets and a respectful divorce process. But it doesn't count for forgiveness or reconciliation. Not after this. I made a mistake. You made a choice. 4 months of choices. Every text message, every secret meeting, every lie you told me was a choice. And now you get to live with the consequences of those choices. After she hung up, I sat on my deck and watched the last of the sunset fade into darkness. Somewhere across town, Gregory Thornton was probably calculating how much this disaster would cost him. Somewhere else, Rebecca Walsh was beginning the process of canceling a wedding and rebuilding a life. And somewhere in between, Simone was learning that actions really did have consequences, even when you thought you were smart enough to avoid them. Tuesday's conversation was going to be very different from what she was expecting. Tuesday morning brought the kind of gray drizzle that made Seattle feel like the inside of a cloud. I arrived at the coffee shop early, claiming the same corner table where I'd met Rebecca just 3 days ago. It felt like months had passed since then. Simone appeared precisely on time, but she looked like she hadn't slept in days. Her usually perfect makeup couldn't quite hide the dark circles under her eyes, and her hands shook slightly as she ordered coffee from the barista. "You look tired," I said as she sat down across from me. "I wonder why." Her voice carried an edge I'd rarely heard before. "Gregory's been calling constantly. He's convinced you're going to try to destroy his business." "His business is destroying itself. I'm just documenting the process." "Daniel, we need to talk about what you want. What it's going to take to make this go away quietly." I studied her face, noting the careful way she'd phrased the question. "Make what go away?" "The evidence, the screenshots, whatever else you think you have." "I don't think I have anything, Simone. I know exactly what I have. 4 months of documentation showing systematic deception, financial fraud, and adultery. Evidence that would be very interesting to a divorce judge." "What do you want?" she repeated. "I want honesty, for once." "About what?" "About how long this has really been going on. About whether Gregory was the first or just the most recent. About what you actually thought was going to happen when all of this came out." She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup like she was trying to absorb its warmth. "It wasn't supposed to come out. We were careful." "You were careless. You used shared accounts, predictable passwords, and discussed your affair in text messages. That's not careful. That's arrogant. We thought we had time. Gregory was going to handle things with Rebecca gradually, after the wedding." "After the wedding?" I leaned forward. "He was planning to marry her and then divorce her?" "It's complicated." "No, it's not. It's fraud. He was going to marry Rebecca for her family's money and connections, then divorce her once he'd secured what he needed. Meanwhile, you were going to divorce me and wait for him to become available." "That's not how he explained it." "How did he explain it?" "He said the engagement was a business arrangement, that Rebecca's father had invested in several of his projects, and the marriage was part of securing future funding. He said it was temporary, just until he could establish enough financial independence to be with who he really wanted. And you believed that? I wanted to believe it. Even though he was telling Rebecca he loved her? Even though he was planning a honeymoon and talking about buying a house together? Simone's face crumpled. How do you know about that? Because I have access to all of your communications, remember? Including the messages where you asked him about those things, and he told you not to worry about them. He said he had to maintain appearances. He was maintaining 2 relationships, Simone. You weren't his escape plan from Rebecca. You were his entertainment while he planned a future with her. That's not true. Then why did he get so angry when the engagement was canceled? If it was just a business arrangement, why didn't he seem relieved to be free? She didn't answer, but her expression told me she'd already figured out the truth. Gregory had been playing both sides, keeping his options open while committing to neither. When his engagement collapsed, he'd lost his primary plan and was left with what he'd always considered a secondary option. What did he say when you talked to him yesterday? I asked. He said this was temporary, that he'd find a way to fix things with Rebecca, smooth things over with her father. He said we just needed to be patient. And you believed him? I didn't have a choice. Without Gregory, she trailed off, realizing what she'd almost admitted. Without Gregory, you'd be a divorced real estate agent starting over at 35. Is that what you were trying to avoid? You make it sound so calculating. Wasn't it? You evaluated your options, decided I wasn't sufficient for your long-term goals, and began planning an upgrade. The only thing you miscalculated was Gregory's actual intentions. I loved him. The words came out as a whisper. Maybe you did. But he didn't love you. He loved what you represented: validation, excitement, the thrill of getting away with something risky. But when the risk became real, when there were actual consequences, he chose self-preservation over whatever he felt for you. How can you be so calm about this? Don't you feel anything? I feel a lot of things, Simone. Anger, disappointment, betrayal, relief. But mostly, I feel like someone who finally has accurate information about a situation I'd been misunderstanding for months. Relief? Relief that I don't have to pretend anymore. Relief that I don't have to wonder why you seemed so distant, why you were always checking your phone, why you looked at me like I was a problem you were trying to solve. Relief that I can stop trying to fix something that was already broken. She was crying now, quiet tears that she wiped away with shaking hands. What happens now? Now we get divorced. We divide our assets according to Washington state law, we sell the house, and we move on with our lives. And the evidence, the screenshots? That depends on how cooperative you want to be. What does cooperative look like? I pulled a folder from my briefcase and placed it on the table between us. Divorce papers. No fault, 50-50 asset division, no alimony claims from either party. You sign these, we file them, and in 6 months, we're legally single. And if I don't sign, then I file for divorce based on adultery and present all of my evidence to the court. The proceedings become public record, which means anyone can access the details of your affair, including your clients, your colleagues, and anyone else who might be interested in your personal conduct. That's blackmail. That's consequences. You chose to have an affair, Simone. You chose to document that affair in text messages. You chose to mock our marriage to another man. Now you get to choose how public those choices become. She opened the folder and began reading the divorce papers, her lips moving slightly as she processed the legal language. This seems fair, she said finally. It is fair. More than fair, considering the circumstances. What about the house? We'll list it as soon as the divorce is final. Split the proceeds 50-50 after paying off the mortgage and covering selling costs. And my things? Take whatever you want. I've already moved everything I care about. She looked around the coffee shop like she was seeing it for the first time. I can't believe this is how it ends. How did you think it would end? I thought maybe we could be friends eventually. after everything settled down. Maybe we can. Someday. But not now, and not soon. She signed the papers with careful precision, her real estate training showing in the way she initialed each page and dated her signature. When she finished, she pushed the folder back across the table. I'm sorry, Daniel, for all of it. I know you are, but being sorry doesn't change what happened. Will you tell people about Gregory and me? I won't volunteer the information, but if people ask direct questions, I won't lie to protect you. That's fair. She stood to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, you were a good husband. I was the problem, not you. I know. After she left, I sat in the coffee shop for another hour, watching people begin their ordinary Tuesday routines and thinking about how quickly everything could change. 3 days ago, I'd been a married man planning to grow old with someone who was already planning to replace me. Now I was single, financially secure, and free to build whatever life I wanted. My phone buzzed with a text from Luis. How did it go? I typed back. It's finished. Good or bad? Both. Want to grab lunch later? I have some news to share. Absolutely. And Daniel? Whatever happened, you're going to be fine. He was right. I was going to be fine. Better than fine, actually. I was going to be free. Outside the coffee shop window, the drizzle was clearing and patches of blue sky were beginning to appear between the clouds. It looked like the beginning of a beautiful day. 6 months later, I was standing in my new apartment's kitchen, unpacking boxes and arranging my belongings in spaces that were entirely my own. The divorce had been finalized the previous week, exactly as we'd planned. No drama, no court appearances, just paperwork and signatures and the quiet dissolution of 15 years of shared history. The house had sold within a month of being listed, the proceeds split precisely down the middle. Simone had moved to Portland, taking a job with a real estate firm that specialized in luxury properties. We'd exchanged exactly 3 emails since signing the divorce papers, all of them about practical matters like forwarding addresses and tax documents. Gregory Thornton had disappeared from Seattle entirely. According to Luis, who kept track of construction industry gossip with the dedication of a professional journalist, Thornton Development had declared bankruptcy in August. The financial pressure from canceled projects, combined with the damage to Gregory's reputation, had made it impossible to secure new funding. He'd sold his remaining assets, paid off what debts he could, and moved somewhere warmer and cheaper to start over. Rebecca Walsh had sent me a thank you card in September, along with a photograph she'd taken of Mount Rainier at sunrise. The card was simple. Thank you for giving me the chance to build something real. I hope you're doing the same. I was. The apartment was smaller than the house Simone and I had shared, but it felt larger somehow. Every piece of furniture, every book on the shelves, every photograph on the walls was there because I'd chosen it. There were no compromises, no negotiations, no careful balance between competing preferences. My phone rang as I was arranging tools in my new workshop space. Constance Blackwell's name appeared on the screen. How's the new place? She asked. Perfect. Quiet, good light, and close enough to work that I can walk when the weather's decent. And how are you doing? Really? Really? I'm good. Better than I've been in years. I'm glad. You deserve happiness, Daniel. I'm working on it. Good. Because I have someone I'd like you to meet. A friend of mine who's recently single and looking to expand her social circle. She's smart, funny, and has excellent taste in restaurants. Constance. Just coffee. No pressure, no expectations. Just 2 interesting people having a conversation. I considered it. 6 months ago, the idea of dating would have seemed impossible. But 6 months ago, I'd been a different person. Someone who accepted other people's assessments of his worth instead of making his own calculations. What's her name? Sarah. She's a photographer, specializes in architectural subjects. I thought you might have things to talk about. Send me her number. I'll think about it. That's all I ask. After we hung up, I returned to unpacking, thinking about the strange mathematics of relationships. How love could be measured in shared silences and morning coffee routines. How betrayal could be quantified in text messages and secret meetings. How recovery could be calculated in small daily choices and quiet moments of contentment. Simone had been wrong about my worth. I wasn't nothing compared to Gregory Thornton or anyone else. I was exactly what I'd always been, a man who built things carefully, measured twice, and took pride in work that would last. The difference was that now I was building a life for an audience of one, and for the first time in years, that felt like more than enough. Outside my new windows, the Seattle skyline stretched toward Elliott Bay, a collection of structures built by people who understood that the strongest foundations were the ones you couldn't see. I was looking forward to exploring this city as a single man, to discovering what I'd been missing while focused on maintaining something that was already broken. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Hi, Daniel, this is Sarah. Constance gave me your number and said you might be interested in coffee sometime. No pressure, but I'm free this weekend if you'd like to meet." I looked at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "I'd like that. Saturday afternoon work for you?" "Perfect. I know a great place in Fremont. Looking forward to it." I set the phone aside and returned to unpacking, smiling at the possibilities that stretched ahead like blueprints for a building I hadn't designed yet. Whatever came next, I'd approach it with the same careful attention I brought to everything else, measuring twice, building once, and making sure the foundation was strong enough to last. After all, I was an engineer. I knew how to build things that wouldn't fall down.